Hey guys, what's up? ItZMuRdA here with an episode of Analyze This, where we do a little bit of theory crafting. We dig a little bit beneath the surface of things that you may not encounter during normal gameplay. And today, I'm going to look at scope selection in PlanetSide 2, as well as the mouse sensitivity and scoped mouse sensitivity settings that you can find in-game, and what changing those numbers really does for you. So I'm going to start by assuming that you have a DPI and mouse sensitivity setting on your end that you're comfortable with. Now if you don't, I suggest going into VR, or anywhere really for that matter, practice taking shots and acquiring different targets and find something that really works for you. I'm also going to assume that you have mouse acceleration turned off, as that's a pretty big no-no in terms of first-person shooter etiquette. If you don't know, real quick, mouse acceleration being turned on will make it so that the faster you move your mouse, the higher sensitivity you have. As you might imagine, that's pretty bad news, because you will never build up that muscle memory or those twitch reflexes, something that you can reliably, expect a certain outcome for how much input you give your mouse, and that's why I definitely recommend having it turned off. You can definitely Google mouse acceleration if you want. There's lots of articles written on it, or you can ask questions in the comments, and I'll be happy to try to answer them. But I won't go into more detail here, just to leave that as a basis for the rest of this video. So I'm starting off looking at the Gauss Compact S, really for no reason other than it has all scopes available to it other than the sniper scope, but all of this information would apply to any gun and any scopes that it has available to it on any Empire. So I'm here in beautiful VR. It looks like it's kind of sunrise, so why not? Which is a great place to be. And I'll quickly mention that VR doesn't track stats, so you can fire off rounds, whatever. That's not going to affect your statistics at all. However, it does accumulate time played for your character. So if you care about score per minute, if you care about time played, you may want to consider making a BR1 or even a new account, since that's real quick and easy to do with the BR1 if you think you're going to be in here for a while. Because if you rack up hours and hours, and then it's still going to take your score divided by your total time played, and it will lower that if that's something that you are concerned about. So I'm here in VR doing something that I normally do when I'm playing a new game, or when I'm unsure of how certain mechanics work with a given gun or a scope or something like that. And what that is I literally set up on my desk, either using a ruler or two solid objects, something where I have a predetermined set of distance horizontally. In this case I'm going to use about 6 inches, where I can start my mouse on the left side of that. And I'll also correspond that to something on screen, in this case this target on the left's head. And then I can move that same 6 inches or so, and then stop on another object, or at the end of the ruler, or whatever it is that you do, and I'll see how far my screen moved in-game relative to the input that I gave it. And then I can switch. Make sure you also stay in the same spot, you don't move your character with your movement keys. I can switch scopes, get something like a 1x out. I was using hipfire there, so obviously that'll be the most sensitive, and that's just something you need to learn to deal with. In most games, your hipfire is usually the most sensitive compared to ADSing, and that's fine. Now I'm going to ADS with a 1x scope. Now if I do the same exact movement on my mouse pad, end up about here, in this fourth little yellow marking on the wall. Now if I take off the 1x scope, and I do iron sights while ADSing, I am going to end up in the exact same spot. Likewise, if I use the other 1x choice, which is the NV scope, you'll see the same results, because all of the 1x scopes share those properties and those variables with the iron sights. So that's something that you can come to learn pretty easily when using either iron sights or a 1x scope, that the same amount of input on your end gives you the same desired output. Now when you take that up to a higher magnification, like for instance a 2x scope, you're going to get different results. And for each magnification level thereafter, you're going to get more different results. So moving that same distance with the 2x only gets you to about here. Now obviously that's because it's higher magnification, and that does make more sense in reality. However, a game isn't all reality. It's still, when you're trying to be the best gamer you can be, it's learning those twitch reflexes, building that muscle memory, and things like that. And that's to say that using different scopes is not necessarily helping you at all. In fact, it's hurting you probably, because I know a lot of people just think, oh, there's no downside to scopes. I'm going to just pick, a 4x because I like how this one looks, or a 2x for this range, and then use a 1x. And if you're using all sorts of different scopes constantly, you're never building that muscle memory and that twitch reaction by having the same input required for the desired output. So I definitely suggest sticking with one type of scope. For me, I pretty much only use 1x scopes, other than my hipfire, of course, and then I get used to that. If I was switching to a 3.4 and then a 4, it really just throws you off, and while it may not seem like it at the time, over time, it really just hinders your ability to learn, to build that in your brain and in your wrist, the muscle memory and the twitch reaction. So I really recommend trying to stick with one scope type. And the 2x is actually the oddball out, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later when I talk about the sensitivity settings. But for now, if I take a 4x and I do the same movement, you'll notice something completely different. It almost seems arbitrary because it ended up in the middle of where the 2x left off and the 1x is left off. Now it isn't arbitrary, and that's where the scope sensitivity comes in. Obviously, if I was to use a 6x, 3.4, whatever, you'd all get different results with that, but that's something you can try on your own, so I won't bother you with it. Now if you go into the settings here, general settings, you have mouse sensitivity and scoped mouse sensitivity. Those are the two that I'm going to talk about. Now, scoped mouse sensitivity says that increasing the slider will make you turn faster while zoomed in, essentially. That isn't exactly what it does. It is for certain scopes, but it's not very clear. So if I turn this way up, obviously my hip fire is the same. That's unchanged. I'm scoped with a 4x right now. I'm going all over the place. I'm doing 360s for days. I could never aim like that. However, if you say, okay, let me adjust my scope sensitivity because I really like my 1x and my 2x's, and I want to adjust it and fine-tune it a little bit. Well, it doesn't change even for the 2x, which surprised me at first, and certainly it doesn't change for the 1x scopes either. So in order to change the 2x, you need to change this sensitivity, which now my 2x is going crazy, but also my hipfire will be going crazy, and also my 1x scopes will be going crazy. So you have this one setting completely in charge of your hip fire, your 1x scopes, and your 2x scopes, and of course your iron sights as well. And this setting only controls your 0.34 times magnification scopes and above. So for me, considering I almost never use, I never use 3.4 for 6x scopes, anything like that. The only time that I do is with the default bolt driver setup, or any bolt action if I'm playing VS or TR, and I don't actually pick a scope for it. So I use the default scope on that, which is about a 6 or a 7x. So what I've done is I've tuned my scope mouse sensitivity to 0.12 because that's a value that I'm comfortable with, along with my DPI, which is 800 by the way, also pretty low, for when I'm doing sniping. So this setting only affects me when I'm sniping. If you use different types of higher magnification scopes, then it's going to affect you with those as well, and you may want to look into changing this more. But for me, it's only sniping, and then everything else is here. My hip fire, my ADS, iron sights, my 1x, my 2x. Now here's where I said that the 2x is the oddball, because the 2x changes with this slider, but it still has different properties, different variables, compared to the other scopes that it changes with. So the 1x and the iron sights, they're all great. They all change, the same amount of input gives you the same output, but the 2x, it's different for it. Yet you have to use the same slider to adjust them. So again, that goes back to what I said about I really recommend not using the 2x unless you are pretty much only using the 2x, and you can tune that sensitivity setting to something you like for the 2x and for your hip fire and whatever, and you're not switching back and forth between 2 and 1 or 2 and something else, because it's really just going to impede your ability to learn that muscle memory and those twitch reactions. Now, if you do really love a 3.4 or a 4 or one of the higher magnification scopes, what you can do with the current setup is tune this scope's mouse sensitivity setting to something that you like. Maybe say, take your 3.4 and figure out what type of input you need to make it feel like your iron sights. And since you have two separate sliders for that, you can do that, and maybe that will enable you to use a 3.4 sometimes and an iron sight other times, or a 1x other times, because you have the same input to output ratio for both of them, where you can't really do that with the 2x, and you can't do that with different scopes above 3.4x. So that's just something to take into consideration. I'm not going to tell you only use this scope or never use that scope, but it's information that I feel is not immediately apparent, and something that you definitely should know when choosing your scopes and when choosing how to set up these sensitivities. I personally, like I said, almost always just use reflex 1x. I'm not a big fan of the night vision, although I know a lot of people are, so I'm not going to knock it. I pretty much just use reflex or hipfire, and that's something I've gotten very used to, where my hipfire is about twice as sensitive as my ADS sensitivity, and it's something I've had in PlanetSide 1, it's something I've had in Battlefield 3, and before that in Bad Company 2, and so on and so forth, going back through my gaming history of a very similar setup for sensitivities. When I start playing a game, I do this type of thing to set them up properly to feel the same. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I didn't want this video to ramble on as long as it already has, but I appreciate you guys checking it out, sticking through it if you have, and please, as usual, comment, rate, subscribe. That stuff really helps me out. And definitely check out the stream at ItZMuRdA.com or twitch.tv/ItZMuRdA_TV. And I will see you guys soon with more videos to come for sure. Take care.